Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Somoza Show. Today we have a special guest. It is my honor to have attorney Vera Zambrano here today with us today. Attorney Vera Zambrano, thank you for being here. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. So what I'd like to do, may I call you Vera? Is that okay?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So Vera, what I'd like to do is I'd like to go ahead and introduce you real quick to our audience so that everybody knows who you are. So let's go ahead and get started. So attorney Vera Zambrano was admitted to the Berlin Bar Association back in 2017. She's a member of the German American Lawyers Association. And in 2018, you started your own firm, which quickly expanded, right, internationally. And you're also a member of the International Bar Association. You've earned recognition for your proficiency in mediation and resolution of high conflict cases with international context, which I'm excited to unpack that right there. That alone is fascinating. You have been a lecturer at the Berlin University of Economics and Law. In 2000, you won the Boutique Law Firm of the Year at the Berlin Prestige Awards as the most innovative and modern legal practice. That's exciting. Congratulations on that. Your areas of practice include family law, inheritance, criminal law, real estate law, music, corporate law, and labor, among others, I'm sure. You actively participate in various legal networks, including networks here in the United States and also in Germany. You're actively involved in professional development, and areas that seem to be of interest to you are the mediation, interrogation techniques, the psychology of interrogation, insolvency administration, commercial law, and international family law. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and welcome you. Thank you again for being here, Attorney Zambrano. Vera, right? That's right.
Yes.
So
correct.
thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you so much for your introduction and for having me today. Yes, my name is Vera Zambrano. I'm the lead attorney of Vera Zambrano Associates. I started my practice in Germany, where I grew up and where I was born, in the south of Germany, to be specific, in Europe. And I expanded my law firm after 2.5 years to the United States to practice international law. I made some special courses for that, and I am practically working in a lot of family law cases, criminal law, private law, and all the other areas you mentioned. We also have cases in those areas.
That's awesome. And if I may ask you, Vera, so how did you, what age and what led you to decide to pursue a career as an attorney?
Yes, so I was pretty young when I wanted to become an attorney. I think not too young, right? But I was 17, 18, finishing high school in Germany, and I knew I wanted to become an attorney, but also I knew that I wanted to become a business owner, a company owner, and not to work for someone else, right? So as a lot of Americans know that and strive to be a company owner, I always wanted to have my own company and also work with people from around the globe. So most of my clients are not German or not European, but they are living anywhere in the world, and they have specific problems with Germany or with Europe. And so they need an attorney who can represent them, consult and represent them in specific areas, right? When they lived in Europe or in Germany in the past, or they have an ex-spouse, or they have still children or a business partner in Europe, and they have major problems solving these issues.
And what is it that you said at 17 or 18 is when you decided that you wanted to become an attorney and a business owner? What led you to that decision?
So I knew, like, I was watching others being an attorney, right? Like in university, we can look into a university as a guest, right? And to see those courses. And I knew that I wanted to be an attorney because I thought that I could make the biggest impact for people's lives. I like solving problems, right? The more complicated, the better, because it's like, it's always a challenge, and you grow with each case and with each challenge. And I thought that I can help most of the people by, supporting them, consulting them, and solving their legal problems.
Okay. And then what specifically led you to decide to go into international law, right? Because you could have just decided just to do law, practice law there in Germany, but you've expanded, right? What
Yes.
led to that decision?
Yes, so most clients that contacted me when I opened up my business in Berlin, which is like the capital in Germany, were internationals, were expats, were non-German speakers, were like mostly English speaking. And I got a lot of inquiries from those people, right? From people who were not familiar with the German justice system or the German legal system in general. And that's why it made me just, it was a natural response to say, okay, I need to look more for those individuals. I need to see where they're coming from. Most of them were American citizens living in Europe or in Germany. And that made me realize I had to, go more beyond the German borders, and I have to take that into consideration and build a second office.
Nice. What types of cases, can you give us some examples specifically, like what types of cases you handle that are international?
Yes, so a lot of cases are actually international divorce cases, international custody, international, everything that relates to children and families. We have a lot of also child kidnapping, abduction cases where children are getting abducted or children are they are not getting sent back to where they should be, right? So we also have deportation cases when a person from another country living in a foreign country needs to be deported by the government, right, to represent and to defend this individual. So there are a lot of different, international relationships that have problems, and I can only say that every case is very different. So when you think you had already a case before like that, it's definitely not happening, because there's always a different background. The families is always a different, constellation, or also businesses that have major disputes, right, about financial assets. When a partner is trying to leave the company, right, or there was an offense in the company, they have to, you have to still protect your assets in the company and try to walk away. So there are always a lot of problems to solve.
Yeah, it's funny. I recently had a partner who's an attorney, and we were practicing law in several different areas, and we quickly realized that it was just too complicated. It was just too many areas of law that we're trying to specialize in. And even like within like one specific type of law, right? Like let's say we were talking about criminal law, like that is so complex just by itself. Like there's so many levels and so many scenarios. And even if you were to look at like a specific type of crime, even within that, it gets so complicated and so nuanced. I can only imagine what it's like to practice international law, because now you're dealing with laws, with multiple countries and
Yes.
how they kind of play against each other and how they overlap, or, just the nuances of that.
Yes, but also you mentioned criminal law, which is it's funny that you mentioned that, because criminal law is actually the law that is, applies for the United States. You only have one criminal legal system, right? So the criminal code applies for every state. For instance, when you look at family law or you look at other areas of law, you have a different system in every state. So that on top of it, right, that you have to deal with, Texas has a different family law system than Florida. And so you have to look at where are the people living, where are the kids residing, and where do you have to go to court, right? Because all the courts are also acting different regarding their jurisdiction.
Right? So it gets very complicated.
Yes,
Yeah.
but also very interesting, right? It's like you learn a lot. You learn a lot with each and every case. And you do have to do a lot of research to consult the client, right? And you have to always stay on track, right? As when you make mistakes, then you're liable for it, right? You're liable for consulting the client not appropriately, or for going to court with the wrong, claim or application. So you have to be very, very focused, and always double check.
Yeah. You seem very driven. I mean, obviously just based on what we talked about so far, and then I'm sure that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's, I'm sure, all kinds of other passions and things that you pursue. Where does that drive come from?
So I guess I was always a very curious person. So I think drive comes from staying curious, always wanting to learn and learn and learn. So when I was in school, I had a lot of different passions, right? I thought that law is a very, very broad field that you can do a lot of things in life with. It's not very specific. You can work for a company, you can work for a law firm, you can work for a governmental institution, right? So you're never really restricted in what you're doing. And you can always change also within the areas of law that you practice. So it's different from being a judge or a prosecutor, where you have, your certain areas of law and you get the cases assigned, and you cannot really decline or say, I don't want to do this, or it's not what I want to really practice, right? So you're free and flexible what you're doing.
Yeah. What is your jet fuel? What is it that you're chasing, or what is it that you're running from on your in life, right? On a daily basis.
So jet fuel, that's a very nice metaphor. When I think about what fuels me, it's, I think, helping people, trying to solve problems where people are in and they cannot solve it themselves, right? And try to make an impact on people's lives. Because it's one thing, it's easy to help people that are your family, right? Or close to you, or you have a relationship with, right? But to help someone that you don't know and you only meet once in life, right? And you don't have a connection with, to help those people the best you can, I think, is always a goal that I try to always fulfill.
Yeah. And it requires a lot of empathy, right? Which speaks to you, right? To your character, because like you said, it's easy to help your parents, your family, sister, brother, who you love, who you're related to by blood,
Yes.
but to be able to devote months or years out of your life to helping somebody who you have no relationship to, that requires real empathy. So yeah, kudos
Well,
to
like, it's also you learn a lot about people. It's not about only being an attorney, right? Only being equipped with the legal instruments and trying to only do what is on paper. It's also like family law, especially, or criminal law. You're also trained in trying to listen a lot to people, to try to understand where they're coming from, right? To try to accept their story, and you don't have to identify yourself with them, but you still have to try to understand them and try to, have empathy, as you said, empathy for them, and still try to guide them the best way possible. Because of course you should not identify yourself with your clients, right? In no business field, but you should still try to, so they walk out better out of your office, or they walk out better from this situation in life before they met you, right? So they should always you should always make their life better, or more, more the light on the tunnel, right? When you look at their life and they're in a misery, or they're very in a dramatic situation, you should always try to make it brighter for them, and make it and solve the solution in the best case.
Yeah. And just to change the subject just a bit, I'd love to find out, I'd love to know from you, what would you say, how would you describe, what were the three most pivotal moments in your life? I'd love to know what those three are for you specifically.
The most important moments in my life are probably the decision to, when you go to university, you have like a lot of expectations, a lot of hopes. You think, oh my God, this is going to be awesome, this is going to be so great. And then you have the first setback, or you have the first course is like too difficult. You're thinking to yourself, how do you ever get through this? And to have those lessons and to still not give up. I think that's one of the biggest lesson that you learn in law school. Like, we have 2 bar exams in Germany and special courses on top of it. So you have no chance. You have to go through it all, or you give up early, right? So because it would be a waste of your lifetime to just go through the 5 or 6 years to do the bar exam, the first bar exam, and then to give up, right? It's a complete waste of time. So they force you to stay, right? So you just have to go through it. And I think never give up. No matter if it's like, you cannot like everything, you cannot be the best in everything, right? So just try to go through it. I think that's one big lesson. Another one is that you should always, like I have families that are in a very, very dramatic state, right? Where they lost their children due to custody battle, and they try to just at least see them again, right? So that reminds you of, all the blessings you have when you wake up and you're healthy and you have your kids, right? Or you have your partner, or you have your home. Those are already blessings enough, right? So a lot of people don't have that, or they don't have the needs, the daily needs in life. So it makes you more, I think, grateful for everything in life that you have. Yeah, those I would say are the most important lessons so
Yeah.
far.
Is there a third one? Because that would be two, right? Going through college, and then you said helping people out and seeing kind of these really devastating kind of situations where it makes you kind of reflect and realize how grateful you are, right, for what you do have, right? Some of the basics. Is there a third thing or moment in your life that was pivotal that
Not that I really can think of. Like I come across cases every day that I'm just surprised, right? How people act with each other that were former intimate family, right? That are acting like is it their enemies and they have to fight each other, right? So you think the closest person can become, in the world, if you choose the wrong person to go through life, you can end up with, the biggest challenge and the biggest struggles in your life. So to a lot of clients also ask me, like, when they want to get remarried, they ask, do you have any tips for, family? How can I establish my family? Like, should I dare to get married again? And I tell them that they need to list what they need in life, right? They cannot just, dive in and hope for the best. They have to have a certain list that they know this is important for me and for my kids. And you should never, like, if you choose the wrong partner, it's worse than choosing the wrong career, right? Because a career you can change, you can adjust, you can learn, you can grow, but choosing the right partner is either gonna, build you up and makes you build, an amazing life, or the opposite, right? So I would say, like, a lot of people should wait, until they're really ready before they, go into and, try to be happy. Those people should try to be happy with themselves first, and build their own life. So they cannot, be damaged by the wrong relationship.
Sure. Okay. Awesome. So we talked a little bit about, the criminal justice system, and I have a little bit of experience with that. That's one of the areas that you practice in as well. I'm curious to know, and you practice in Germany as well as here in the United States. Are you familiar with a study that was done where they compared the criminal justice system for several, first world countries, right? A lot of the European countries, United States, and how they did a ranking of who had the better criminal justice system. Are you familiar with that study?
Yes, so I think you relate to the studies that they compared mostly US and Western countries, right? First world. And the results were pretty obvious that a lot of, especially Scandinavian countries, so Sweden, Finland, and Denmark, but especially Denmark, number one, like the number one country with the most common, like the fairest and the best country regarding certain criteria for criminal justice. Yeah, so Denmark is a country, in Europe, Scandinavian country, and it's built on social welfare. So it's quite the opposite from the US, right? So that means US is built on institutionalism, a lot race differences that you cannot deny, right? And a huge gap between, poverty and wealth. Like very few create, the biggest wealth, and a lot of people have to live below the poverty limits, right? So in European countries, also in Germany, where I come from, right? There's a social welfare system in place. So the government tries to keep people on the same level, right? There is not like, there are like a very few percent super rich people, but not like in the US, right? So we have richer people or more wealthy people, but most people are at a certain average level. So that keeps the economy at a certain level, right? There's not a huge, peak. And also in the social justice is a little bit more balanced, right? In the US, we see, a huge gap between poverty and wealth, and also the incarceration rates in the US is very high. So I just read last year, like end of last year, it was 1.8 million. So the United States is like it's not the best position, but it's the country with most of the people incarcerated in prison or jail. Number two is, I believe, China, and then Brazil, and then Russia. So it's that I think that comes from those specific criteria of we have this social injustice, we have this deeply rooted treating race is different, right? Still in the institutions, and yeah, to get to that problem, you have to first look at the cause. So how can you make it more like, how can you make it fairer for most Americans, right? And also what I wanted to say as the last point is that most people who are actually in jail or in prison in the US are more likely to commit a crime a second time or a third time. So the percentage of this level, recidivism, exactly, it's 77% or 78%. So in contrast to Denmark, where it is 22%.
Wow.
So that means the US is focused on punishing a criminal, right? And not so much focused on how do I reintegrate this person into society after they get released.
Yeah, there's so many interesting things that you touched on right there. Let's talk about the very last one that you just pointed out. Let's start there. So you said we're more focused on punishment and less on how do we rehabilitation, right? Is the word that they use. How do we help that person reintegrate back into society and follow rules and conform, right, to the laws. Do you know specifically what it is that they do in Denmark that's a little bit different? Because I've never researched the criminal justice system in Denmark.
So in most European countries, and Denmark is leading the European countries in this aspect, is you have a lot of, first of all, we have not as hard sentences, right? For someone to be convicted and actually end up in prison or jail, you first go through so-called probation sentences. So in the US, it's very likely, even for a first offender, right, to end up in jail and not even get probation in the first time. So European countries, also Germany, you have a lot of probation sentences where you get like 2 years, maximum 2 years on probation. That means you cannot have any other crime in this time, otherwise you will go to prison. And you have a lot of social projects also to try to keep this person out of jail, to say, okay, you're not getting sent to prison this time, but you have to work 200 hours or 500 hours for a specific non-governmental or pro bono institution, right? So to give back to society, to make them think about it, and to give them a second chance, right? In a lot of cases it works. When you look at Denmark, only 22% of people who were already in jail end up again in jail. So that means something has to work here, that they say, okay, I was given a second chance. I'm not, risking again to end up in prison or jail.
Yeah, I'm curious about something. Have you, and these are very specific questions, and if you don't know the answer, I totally understand, right? But have you noticed whether or not or if there's anybody's done a study, whether or not there's a difference in the types of crimes that are committed here in the US versus the crimes that are committed, say, in Denmark or in Europe as a whole? Or are the numbers pretty much the same? The types of crimes, are they pretty much the same?
The types of crimes regarding age, or
the types. So for just as an example, like, so if in the US, let's just say, right, 10% of the crimes committed in the US are murder, 20% are sexual crimes,
Yes.
right? Do you know if there's any kind of discrepancy as far as are the percentage relatively the same as far as the types of crimes that are committed in Europe?
Yes, so I'm not exactly aware of the specific, how much is the percentage for sexually assault crimes or robbery or theft, but it's not so much about the type of crime. It's more about in the US, mostly every crime or offense is punished harder than in any European countries. So, for example, in Europe, we have for a lot of crimes, you still get or have a chance for probation, right? Where you don't even have a chance in the US, right? A robbery or armed robbery, for example, right? There is no space for any, no judge in the US will say, okay, you get probation for that. In Germany, I've seen that already, right? So it's very different when you look at the length of sentences and how it is treated, right? So the harder it is treated, the more likely they end up in jail for the first crime. And the longer they are in jail or in prison, the more likely they commit another crime. Because when someone is, for example, when someone is in prison or jail for more than 5 years, this person will definitely lose their home, their apartment or their house, right? Their job, and most of the social circle they have, right? Most of the family members are a social circle. So they have almost no chance. I'm not giving any excuses, but they don't mostly have no chance to get a job, right, and to survive. So they end up radicalizing more. They end up getting into the crime and into the criminal circle and the criminal contexts that they built in prison even more than before, because they still have to survive, right?
No, that's beautiful. That's exactly what I was indirectly. I was going to get to exactly that point, and you almost like read my mind, and you made the point, right? I was thinking if in Europe they do more probation, I was thinking that's interesting because, and you picked the perfect example, right? The aggravated robbery, right? In Utah, right, where I'm at specifically in Utah, that's a life sentence. It's not even like 5 years or 10 years. It's a life sentence, and it's actually it could be anywhere from 5 to life, 10 to life, 15 to life. And yeah, there's a good chance that the person, may end up spending, a couple decades, right?
Yes.
There are exceptions, right? And but that's not the general rule. The general rule is that that's automatically it gets enhanced and it's a lifetime. And I was just thinking in my mind, I was thinking, is there any chance that maybe the reason that, in Europe they give up probation so much is because the crimes are more petty, right? They're lower degree, but you just made the point that's not the case. You've actually seen armed robberies where they've gotten probation and not sent directly to prison or jail. So I love that you made that point. And then what your point about the 5 years, you're right. After X number of years, it becomes that much more difficult to reintegrate back into society.
Yes. Yes, it's almost impossible. It's not impossible, but if you don't have a family business that you can, step in, or it's like, who gives you a chance, right? You have to lay it out that you were in prison, or you have just like this huge gap in your curriculum vitae, right? You have to explain to people what happened in the meantime, or if they, it's just hard for someone to really get back into society, to build a life, an honest life. Even if you want to, it makes it very hard for people to get back, and to go over the golden bridge that we say golden bridge in Germany, when you give someone a second chance, right? And who got only probation or only like 2-3 years, right, in jail, which is like also a long time, but they still, think about it. And in Denmark, it's amazing, right? That like the level is only 22% of people that are, getting back a second time, who were already convicted criminals, right? It's an amazing number to think about it.
It is. And something else that plays into this is that you were talking about, the financial part of it, right? When they integrating back into society, getting a job, getting a house, all that stuff. Here in the US, we have, the moment that you get out, you're a felon. And legally, anybody can discriminate against a felon, right? They can keep you from getting housing, even if you've turned your entire life around. Just for having a felony, they can keep you from getting housing, from getting a job, from being part of all sorts of things. I mean, doors are just shut everywhere. And that's encouraged. It's not even just something that's out there, it's encouraged. And I know that, like, for example, and I don't know what, I'd love to hear what it's like in Germany, but I know that in England, they have a law that says, I think it's like something about the right to be forgotten, right? There's after a certain amount of time, you can petition courts to automatically issue an order that your name and everything about related to your felony just has to just disappear off the web, right? Off the anything online. It's got to just they got to remove it, right? Any of the media companies. And that makes a big difference, because then you're able to reinvent yourself and restart yourself. And that's so important, because even for you, right? If we look at you today and we look at you 10 years from 10 years ago, you're not the same person, right?
Yes,
So,
exactly. So
yeah,
people also, when I have clients, in criminal law, I tell them, like, people, make mistakes. That doesn't make them a bad person per se, right? There are crimes which I would like consider to be very bad, very evil. But like a crime itself, where you don't hurt no one, right? Where you don't hurt a person specifically, is a wrong action. That doesn't make the whole life of this person, bad itself. So people should be given second chances, right? It's just, how much is the society, especially in the US, how much is society ready to give up, right? To give a second chance. Because also when you look at the very specific example of the death penalty, which is still, in the US, which is still valid in a lot of states, right? Including Florida, Texas, right? A lot of southern states. In Europe, it's long forbidden in all of the states, or in all of the countries, right? It's like, I don't know how many decades we don't have it anymore, right? I guess 50, 60 years. So it makes a big difference, because we don't, in Germany or in Europe, they don't believe in punishing and trying to, an eye for an eye, right? They try to say, okay, you did this wrong, you have to be punished in a certain way, in a human way, right? But you have to be able to get back on your feet, right? Because you are still, a person, a resident, a citizen of a certain, in your society. You're still a family member, right? And you have to be able to still support your family, or contribute to economy, right, in the long term. But those people have no chance, right? So you can argue about, is it still a matter of, should you still have the death penalty in states? That's pretty much a very, very emotional and passionate discussion, right? You can be pro or anti. I'm just saying, like, you have to think about what you're that the first thought of trying to prevent people from doing those crimes doesn't work. Because when you have death penalty and you look at those states in Texas or Florida, right, it does not lead to less crime. It does not lead to more people staying out of prison, right? Even if you have the death penalty for certain crimes. So it's like, does it really work to threaten people with this with this sentence, right? Or lifelong sentences for a lot of crimes? Does it really work when you have like a high percentage of second offenders, people getting back to prison?
yeah. It's interesting. Just a few days ago, I came across a story. I was watching something on YouTube, and I came across a story of a guy that, and the details are, just paraphrasing here, right? But the house that he was living in, he was living with his 2 or 3 daughters, young daughters. The house burned down. He wasn't able to save them. He was charged with capital murder, right? They decided that they did an investigation, and they decided that he was guilty, that he set the fire, that he killed his 3 daughters. They sentenced him to death. And I can't remember the state, it might have been Texas. But after the state carried out its sentence, and they murdered him, they killed him. Shortly thereafter, there was another fire on that same street, just a little further down on that street. And they sent, they've been seeing years, and they sent another fire investigator. And this fire investigator found that the fire had been started in a similar way as the other one. And it was not that it was intentionally set, it was some kind of some sort of defect in the way that the electrical was done for those houses, right? So that same developer had developed all the houses on that street, and he had made a mistake, or he had used maybe some product that was faulty, right? That maybe deteriorated, and after X number of years, it had a likelihood of igniting fire. So anyways, so the point is that the guy ended up being innocent. The guy was innocent, and they murdered him. And they, not only did he have the pain of losing his daughters, but then he also had the pain of knowing that, that everybody thought that he murdered his own daughters, and they took his life, and that's something that I think is another argument for getting rid of, right? You made some great points on for potentially, right? I'm not saying that's your position, but you made some great points potentially for why we should get rid of the death penalty here in the U.S. But in addition to that, right, you have the fact that right, here in the United States, we convict innocent people all the time. It's not a secret. It's well known, and we convict innocent people at a higher percentage than the general public is led to believe. So.
Yes. So you have a good point when you say it's a very high. It's actually the highest percentage that people get, like innocent people get convicted, is in the U.S. You would think, it might be, in China, in Saudi Arabia, or in Russia, where you have no freedom of speech, where you have a lot of like those freedom rights that you have in the U.S. you don't have in those countries, right? But it's actually in the U.S. So you think about, why is it like that, right? Is it the judges? Is it a fast process? Is it the court trials are too fast or too accelerated? But it's also based on a lot of jury trials, actually, that you have jury trials, and they have to be non-legal professionals, so they cannot be in a legal professional field, and that also leads to a lot of court trials are more to entertain, right, or to try to convince a jury members on a different level, not only the legal perspective, right? So you create a different scenario, and you can actually get a different result. If a judge is going to decide on it, it's more like he checks the facts, right? Can you prove it or not? Can the government prove beyond a reasonable doubt that someone is guilty, right, or not? So there are facts, there are parameters. But a jury is also more likely to be, make decision on emotional or other motives, right? So you can argue pro and con, right, about those specific, obviously very charged topics. But you have to look at, what is the long-term cause and what is the long-term consequence of these mechanisms for society.
Yeah. No, it's unfortunate, and it's interesting because I've been playing around with the idea of how do you, what would be the solution, right? And it's and there's so many ideas, and then there's pros and cons to all of them. But one thing that you touched on is you have a jury trial, which for a lot of reasons it's a great system, but in another way, you have ordinary people, and if you understand human nature and human psychology, then you can persuade people, right? You can persuade somebody to go against their better judgment, right?
Yes.
Even if they know in their gut that person might be innocent, right? It's the prosecution has not met their burden of proof. If you have a great prosecutor that is just great with oratory and persuasion and with words, you can end up like changing that person's opinion just because people are easily persuaded.
Yes. On one side, I have to say a jury trial is it's an amazing, institution, because you get a lot of people to say, don't look at it like, a legal professional would, right? Look at it with common sense. But on the other side, there's a reason why a judge has to be a legal professional, right? There's a reason why the prosecutor has to go through all these, challenges to become the prosecutor. So but a jury trial is always a very, it can be easily, persuaded, right? You can create a different scenario in their mind to change their emotions, and then you have a different outcome. So there's a lot of pros, but there's a lot of cons. In Germany or in Europe, we don't have any jury trials, right? We don't have that. In England, they still do. But in a lot of European countries, the system is totally different. They say you have to have legal professionals deciding over a case, right? Because if the government has to prove that someone is guilty or not. You don't have to prove that you're innocent, right? In the US, you have to almost, have a defender that is proving that you're not guilty, right? So you have a different dynamic, a very different dynamic. Yeah, but it's based on a total different history also, right? So yes.
Yeah. And it's funny because you alluded to something right now that I've touched on in some of the content that I create, which is, we talk about how in the U.S. system, right? They say you're innocent until proven guilty, but it's really just it's a facade. It's not. If you really understand the system, it's not quite like that, right? It's in general, and maybe you disagree with this, and I'd love to hear your opinion. But I mean, it's first off, you're putting the jury, right? The jury's already because of the propaganda and the media and all that, already automatically it's presented as though the person's already guilty. Because of the respect that prosecutors have, people are going into it already thinking, well, if he's bringing the case, then the person's probably guilty, right? Just human nature. Then you have, like you said, you have a defender, a public defender that's appointed, and really their job is to try to prove that you're not guilty, because if they go in and all they argue is, well, the state didn't make their case. I've seen scenarios like that where, defense attorney will say, well, it's obvious the prosecution didn't meet their burden of proof. So they decide that they're going to rest. They're not going to present any evidence, and it'll backfire.
Yes.
Even though the law says you're innocent until proven guilty, the jury expects the defense to prove their innocence as well. Because it's ordinary people, even though they're not supposed to, because you have ordinary people making the decision. It's intuitively there's something in them that seems to.
Yes, it gives you a much broader spectrum of different outcomes, right? So when you go into either way, doesn't matter which side you're on, you go into a trial, you don't know what the witness is going to say, right? You don't know, what the opposite party is going to present. You don't know all the evidence because they can still present the evidence spontaneously, right? You don't know what's going to happen, even if you're prepared perfectly fine. So for all these circumstances, you cannot really predict the outcome. So, and that makes it extremely exciting, right? But also for the one who sits there, right? The defendant, you don't know what happens, right? You can call in your witness, right? You think it's gonna, help you confirm your side of the story. And then this witness is actually coming up with something else, right? You don't have control over these truth, right? So it's like we have a saying that in Germany we have a saying, before a trial and before God, you're a little tiny dot and you have no control. So that means you just have to hope for the best and prepare for the worst, right?
How do you say that in Germany? In German?
So we said in German, we say vor Gott, vor Gericht und Gott ist man auf hoher See. So you're pretty much on the open ocean, in court or before God. So that means you are not controlling the outcome, right? So that's why it's so important to, you have to be prepared for, all kind of scenarios, right? To say best case scenario, but also worst case scenario. Sure. To not walk in blindly, but you have to also be open and honest to your defendant, to your client, and say, we're not sure what's going to happen because we don't predict all the other parties here involved, right? We cannot control anyone. So it's going to happen the way it has to happen, and we are prepared to step in if something happens that is not in our favor, right? But it's definitely exciting, but you have to be able to deal with a lot of frustration too. A lot of, failure always happens. You can, even if you're, best prepared, the prosecutor can still have another, opinion, and the judge can follow the prosecutor's opinion. Even if you're an amazing representation, right? You're an amazing defense attorney. That doesn't mean that you're going to win every case, right? In fact, you cannot win every single time, but that's also, you have to, still be able to say, even if I lose this, I still gonna prepare for the next one, and I still try to, defend the person's rights as best as I can.
Yeah, I love that. Perfect transition. question for you. What, you're very successful, accomplished quite a bit so far in your life. Where do you see your law firm in 10 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
So in 10 years is a long time, right?
It is a long time.
In 10 years, I would hope that I can still grow, right? And reach a lot of people and try to help all those people that have come across my firm, in their situations, families, individuals, businesses, right? To make an impact and, to leave them better than before, right? To make an impact for their lives. So to grow and to, try to also everyone that I have a lot of students or graduates that reaching out, they want to work for the firm. And I tell them that they have the possibility to do an internship, right? Because we're only hiring attorneys that are already, have everything completed and finalized. Because I cannot, supervise every single case, right? So you have to be your own attorney. You have to be, already ready to go. But a lot of students, I tell them like always, keep growing and take every risk that you can, right? Don't do the things that you did a year ago, right? Do those big challenges, even if you think, oh my God, I don't know how to start. You have to start taking on challenges because only those make you grow, right? If you do, like, it yourself, if you do things that you did already a couple of years ago, you will not look back and say, oh my God, like I learned a lot from those cases, right? Or from those scenarios.
Right. Awesome. And Vera, one question that I always like to ask all of our guests is if today was your last day, right? What 3 things would you want people to remember you by, right? Your generations into the future, whether they're related to you or not related to you, what 3 things would you want to be remembered by?
Well, it's a hard question.
Yeah.
3 things. Okay, if today was the last, I try to, make every day the best that I can, right? So because no one is promised tomorrow. No one. It doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are, sickness or health, it does not matter, right? So no one is promised tomorrow. So make the best out of every day, even if you might think you fail at something or you are not you could accomplish more. Still try to be grateful for every day and try to make the best out of it. I would try to be remembered as someone who is always trying to do the best possible, to help people, to have a lot of empathy, kindness regarding people and understanding. And try to be remembered as a person that is always learning and always taking on risk.
Yeah, I love that. Awesome. Vera, if people want to get a hold of your law firm and hire you or have questions and they'd love to, talk to you some more, how can they get a hold of you?
Yes, so you can always contact us through email or through website, right? We have the website is www.alawyer-berlin-miami.com. You can always send us an email, right? You have there's a lot on Google, I believe, that you can reach out, phone, email, yes, the offices are in Berlin and in Miami, so you can always call them and have them schedule a consultation or a call, and yes, we'll be happy to help.
Awesome. Well, Vera, again, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. It's been an honor to have you on here. So I'd love to have you maybe 10 years from now, have you on the show again.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.